don't know what all this stuff is.
I'll order for you.
Don't they have brown rice and vegetables?
Do you like brown rice and vegetables?
Yeah,
You do.
sort of.
Really?
It's worse than dog food. It is.
I've had dog food.
You have?
Mm-hmm. Long time ago. Doggy chow. Oh, I used to love doggy chow.
I used to love doggy chow, too.
This is Why, with your hosts, Heidi Hedquist and Luke Poling.
Now, let's talk about this article you had sent that upon seeing it, we texted for 2 seconds and I said, no, we have to save off this.
Yes.
It's a ghost ship.
It is a ghost
and there's a long history of ghost ships.
Mm-hmm.
You have your Flying Dutchman.
Yes.
You have your Crawling Belgian.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a McDonald's ghost ship.
It's called the McBarge. It is the proper name.
I know.
McBarge.
But the official name is the Friendship 500.
And it was built for the World's Fair.
Is that, it says, the article I'm looking at, I think I'm looking at a different one, so this makes it all the more enjoyable. For the 1986 World Exposition on Transportation and Communication.
World's Airfare Expo.
It sounds really boring. It was moored hardwood floors, friendly decor, and the kitchen was kept entirely out of sight.
Well, as one does at McDonald's.
Right.
And it's not even the first floating McDonald's.
It isn't? There's others?
There was one in St. Louis that was showcasing the steamboat era.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. But here's the thing. It's been empty for 30 years and it's still there.
Is this McBarge we're talking about? Or
yeah,
is this
McBarge.
They don't even have a kids area, which is weird.
Oh, yeah, that is weird.
Yeah, it featured hardwood floors and friendly decor, and the kitchen was kept entirely out of sight. Like McDonald's is known for its open kitchen concept.
Well, right. It's not J. Alexander's. I don't understand.
Right. Yeah. And then this, again, this is a website, The Ghost in My Machine, which sounds like you really need to get that looked at.
Yes.
But they have to throw in the dig. The food was nothing to write home about. A McDonald's cheeseburger is a McDonald's cheeseburger, no matter where you eat it.
But to that point, there has to be remnants of what makes up a McDonald's cheeseburger on the McBarge, which I have to believe are still like as they were 30 years ago, because we've all seen those experiments of what happens, right? And I feel like there are perfectly intact cheeseburgers. So if the zombies come, should we head to the McBarge for all of our Mickey D's delights, like throw in some cheeseburgers, some McRibs, big DLTs, and we'll make it a little while.
Right. But here we go. Here's I feel like you have buried the lead.
What?
As per usual.
No.
So the idea was for the McBarge to be relocated after the expo. That plan didn't work out. It was moored in an area called Falls Creek, which is a terrible name for a river.
Yes.
Before the owners of the site requested that it be moved. Why? It was relocated to an inlet. And then its rediscovery, as with most things in this world. Do you know this part of the story?
I don't think so.
We can credit Wesley Snipes.
What?
Blade 3 was partially filmed on McBarge.
What?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't bury that lead. I didn't know.
Yeah.
I was excited because the staff all dressed in sailor garb. I thought that was the lead I buried.
Nope. Wesley Snipes was on that. Was on McBarge.
Why isn't it in the historic registry then?
Yeah, I don't know.
And why
I
did
mean,
he save it?
that's true. And looking at this picture, it's got real hardwood floors.
You're
Which,
really big into the hardwood floors.
well, I'm just saying that is not a traditional McDonald's thing. McDonald's has those brown
No,
tiles that you can just hose off and act like,
yes, but
let the second shift take over. They'll deal with
true.
this.
But neither are sailor uniforms and a nautical interior and floating in Vancouver.
Right, that's true. No, if you had to float in a province, I'd say Vancouver. Vancouver all
Yeah,
day.
probably the best
Yeah,
ones.
definitely. Queensland, I'm good.
Yeah,
It's got a great view, even
it
in this inlet.
does. It does. I mean, maybe it could be a yacht.
No, that hardwood floor that's looking for someone to dance on it. How did you come to Showgirls? Did you quote unquote get it the first time, or how long did it take you to sort of appreciate it the way your film appreciates it?
I came to it late in life. I was probably a little too sheltered to see it when it first came out. I was probably still only watching Saved by the Bell when it was first in theaters. So it took me about 10 years to come around to it. And at that point, I was aware that it had become a queer cult classic, but I feel like for whatever reason, I never took upon myself to watch it. And I feel like Showgirls, I eventually saw it the way many of us see it, where someone sits you down and says, you need to watch this right now. And so, or if it comes up, and that was very much my case. I was with a friend when I was going to film school in Chicago, and we were hanging out at his apartment one night, and it came up, and he like walked over to his wall and popped it off and put it in, and my mind was just blown. I was kind of primed to know that it was like bad in a good way, but I don't think I was really. I remember thinking, "Oh, this is not what I thought it was gonna be," and it just was like your heart starts racing, and you just start to get really excited, and just the things, so much is going through your mind. That I just didn't want it to end.
Why did you feel it was important to make the film?
I felt like it was important because, I didn't really know in the beginning. I wasn't really quite sure what form it would take, and I, as a television editor, I know how to edit, and that's something I can do, and I was inspired by other films about films like Room 237 and Los Angeles Plays Itself, and very kind of essay driven, commentary heavy, clip heavy. And so in the beginning, it was just like, well, I'm curious about all of this and I don't really know where it's going to lead. But after I started speaking with the people that, I would eventually interview, and seeing at what other types of films, what is possible with kind of fair use and everything. I knew that this was something that I could explore on my own time without setting up any sort of, expectations, or, I knew that this was something that I could do on my own, on my kitchen table, on my laptop, with the interviews, and I could figure it out and make something. And whatever I made, there would be an audience there that would enjoy it and embrace it. So, I mean, it's vastly exceeded any sort of expectation that I had when going into it. So that's how I landed on it.
And that genre of films about films, when you then get to film unsuccessful or films about unsuccessful films, there's not a lot. We were thinking there's what were you saying, Overnight?
Yep.
But that's more of a verite. But then to the use of footage, I mean, I feel like I knew it going in, but I feel like I could have guessed pretty early on that this was made by an editor. The way you used the supplemental footage from Verhoeven's, can we say oeuvre?
Yeah,
Or,
yeah.
or does that sound pretentious?
No,
It does,
no,
but
no.
we like to be pretentious
Yeah,
sometimes.
Yes, that's okay.
yeah. I don't know. I was just blown away by it, and I very much got a Tom Anderson vibe from like the Los Angeles plays itself, or the Rock Hudson film he did, or even The Kid Stays in the Picture a little bit. Like it's just it's such an amazing world that you build, and you sort of drop us all in the middle of it, and it takes a while to acclimate yourself to what we're being. Yeah. But it's a kind of wonderful world, and you do such a great job. I don't know where the question is here. I should say that going in.
That's okay. I can
halfway through here. But like just the watching it, the stuff that's coming out of these people's mouths was just a continual case of me going, "Oh yeah, I never thought about that." From even this idea that this is the unsexiest sex movie, and the way everybody has to talk about being naked while being naked.
Right.
It's just, how did you find these folks? Was this an ongoing process? Because I know that obviously the writers would make sense, but then the one woman who takes the film on almost as to reclaim herself and her personality. I mean, it actually gets affecting and touching, and I would not have expected that in a movie about showgirls.
And that, I didn't. That was something I didn't really expect either. I mean, I knew there's people. I mean, just kind of knowing the afterlife of showgirls, the cult of showgirls. There are names that like the big names that you think of. David Schmader is kind of known as the unofficial ambassador of Showgirls. He's kind of kept it alive through these annotated screenings that he's hosted. He started in Seattle, and basically just kind of breaking it down and explaining how the terrible things and what makes it great because of those terrible things. And so he's been doing these live screenings, and then eventually got asked to do the commentary track on the re-release of the DVD. So he was obviously like the first person I reached out to. And then I had recently discovered Adam Naiman's book, who was pretty new at that time, had just come out. And that was mind-blowing, because that was just looking at it from a completely different lens of not so bad it's good, but just the good things are what make it amazing and what make it kind of brilliant, and kind of looking at it from more of the cinematic perspective, and just looking at, kind of treating it like that. And I hadn't read anything about that before. And then just kind of diving deeper into, the Film Quarterly Roundtable, the reviews. I was aware of the Showgirls, the musical, and I reached out to April Kidwell, who I knew also had played Jessie Spano in their previous musical, which was Saved by the Bell musical. So I thought she would be the perfect person to kind of speak to embodying both of these characters that are so kind of like iconic, that Elizabeth Berkley played. And I was just kind of so moved, and I mean, I hadn't met her before this, and we had our kind of preliminary phone call, and within 15 minutes she had kind of opened up and poured her heart and soul out. And I had no idea of her kind of backstory with all the trauma, and so I just was inspired that she was willing to share all that, and just how much like the power that film has over us. And I know that obviously films are important, and everybody kind of takes what they want from them, but this was something that was deep and real, and it was a kind of a place I didn't really expect to go, but I knew we kind of had to talk about some of those things just because of Showgirls itself and what the content.
Well, and that part of the film is really, it's amazing how you pull that off, because this is a very, like, the trauma is real, which obviously, not to spoil anything for listeners who obviously haven't seen it yet, but you're handling it, and then it's hilarity happening at the same time. And somehow it blends perfectly, where you don't feel bad that you're laughing. You feel touched, but you get over it and can move on. And it was amazing. Like, I don't know, that's impressive.
Yeah, I mean, and that was one kind of going back to your your previous thread, I mean, that was one thing that when I started the process, I went back and watched all of Verhoeven's early films, and because I hadn't seen them, and as you know, American audiences are only familiar with, I feel like the blockbusters, the Total Recalls, the RoboCops, the Starship Troopers, and so that's how I knew him, and so I was like, well, I should just watch these films just to see what's in there and just know, get an idea of what he did before this, and then my mind was, blown watching those, because I could see all these little threads kind of all pointing back to Showgirls, and all these like strange moments that, are just kind of don't make sense, and people can't really wrap their heads around, like, why was that decision made? And it all kind of, his whole, like, I think people see Showgirls as like this outlier amongst the rest of his work, and once you really look at it as a whole, it's kind of Verhoeven at his purest. And I thought that kind of taking the visual motifs and themes and cues, and then tying it into the contributors' experiences, so that it kind of makes this new kind of subplot, was interesting to me, and I just, that was kind of like the point of what you're trying to say,
And it's fascinating. I would not have thought you would be able to go back, 20 years of a filmmaker's career, especially with Showgirls. There are other folks you can go, well, of course,
Right.
Spielberg and Kubrick.
It's easy. Yeah, there are those retrospective, films about, De Palma and Spielberg, all that's the thing. Those are obviously fascinating, but they're not really. It's not really debatable. You know what I mean? Like, they're not, people aren't going to like argue with a lot of those filmmakers, the work. And I think with Showgirls, one of the things that is so interesting about it is, the reason that we're still talking about it is because we're not really done with it. As one of the contributors said, we're not done trying to figure out what it means and what we think of it, the response to it. We're still kind of trying to wrap our heads around that. And so I think it's just kind of the perfect snapshot, and it just kind of allows further conversation about what makes something good, what makes something bad, what makes something a success, what makes something a failure, because it's checked every one of those boxes, and at one point. So,
and right before we started here, one of the things we were discussing and debating was, did Verhoeven and Hawes know what they were doing? And this is sort of one of the central questions of the film. And I feel like you constantly go back and forth between the two. What do you think?
I mean, that was one thing. Obviously, that's part of the allure to Showgirls, is trying to figure out what the intent was. And I feel like it's pretty safe to say, like, whatever the intent was, it really wasn't how it's not the picture that we got, or not how it was received, and what was received was something different, and what is celebrated, I think, is something different. But what is celebrated, those failures are celebrated, and it fails specifically, it succeeds specifically because of those failures. And so one of the, obviously, kind of getting into his mind would be, fascinating, and trying to crack the code of like, what was the intent. But, looking at his responses, over the years, I mean, I found that interesting, just to see how that has evolved. And, I don't know if we really would have found anything new. And I kind of considered, their job done after the movie was over. It's kind of like the audience's role is, to take it, and, it becomes our thing, and that's why we're talking about it.
Well, I do think it is such a fascinating movie. I saw Showgirls at a midnight showing, the very first midnight showing, like,
wow.
When it opened, with my college roommate. Wow. We were the only two women in the theater. Lots of solo men in the theater. Mildly
That's
creepy,
right.
But it was okay. And I had grown, and you got it, like, I graduated with Jesse Spano, like class of 93. Elizabeth Berkley was from
Nice.
a town away from me. So we had all these other things going on.
Oh.
We saw the
Michigan.
film.
I'm from Michigan.
Yeah, you are? That's
Oh,
awesome.
boy.
Yeah,
Here we
yeah.
go.
I
Here
grew up
we
in
go.
Troy, and now I'm in Orchard Lake. I went to Oakland University.
I grew up in
gosh,
Troy.
here we go.
You did? I'm ancient.
I went to
I went to Troy High.
Athens. Oh my
I
God.
graduated in '93 with Jesse Spano.
Okay.
So we're
Wow.
rivals.
I'll come back later.
You know, but she went to Harrison. So she went to Farmington Hills Harrison, which I now live in Orchard Lake, so just down the road. But yes. So I was at the Showcase Cinema in Auburn Hills, right by Oakland University, is where I saw it, like right when it came out. We left and we were like, that movie was so awful, but it was so amazing. But it was so amazing. Like we have talked about it for 20 odd years, and we both own it on DVD. Occasionally we dig it out. It's crazy. Two solo, like 20 whatever year old girls with a bunch of creepy guys stayed till the end. We should have probably left, stayed till the end. We loved it.
Were you dressed like Mary Tyler Moore and Rhoda? Because this is what I'm picturing.
Yes. No.
Okay.
Not for that one. No.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I love that you're from Troy.
That's crazy.
That's so crazy.
Yeah. How long did it take it for the film to turn from this? You kind of open the movie where the film has come out. It's sort of an I was going to say sort of. It is an unmitigated disaster. Nobody, I think the woman from USA Today is the only person to somewhat say good things. How long did it take the film to make that turn to people going, oh, there's something here, from either a camp perspective or really starting to appreciate what it is now?
I think it took a special kind of person who had, the fine-tuned like camp radar, like was really, really primed. And so I think there were people like Susan Wazina did mention some of the camp aspects, and that word did come up in some of the reviews, but it was actually about a year. So it was pretty soon. There was an article the year after it came out in the New York Times that was talking about, midnight screenings of it. And MGM was pretty, pretty early on. They were kind of embracing that side of it. I guess they sent some drag queens out to some midnight screenings in New York City to try to get, audience participation. But from what I understand or what I've read, like that didn't, that was fun and cool, but it didn't really feel that organic, and when you had stuff like Peaches Christ midnight screenings in San Francisco, and, there was just a little bit more energy and just love for that. And so I think, Peaches Christ started his in, I think it was a year after it came out too. So it was pretty quick if you knew, and then I think it just would eventually spread. It took me 10 years to see it, so eventually people would, their friends would tell them about it, but it was considered a bomb when it came out, and it was ridiculed and made fun of, and but financially, commercially, it's to this day still one of MGM's highest grossing films based on the rentals and video rentals and DVD sales. So even from a commercial aspect, perspective, you can't say it's a failure.
And it's interesting too, because you compare it to, and you show clips in the film from Rocky Horror, from Valley of the Dolls. They aren't getting that critical reappraisal and that sort of really in-depth. And that's where I get that Room 237 vibe, that people have spent some time with this film. They have lived in it, for better or for worse. They've really devoted some energy to this.
Yeah. And I think, that's what like Verhoeven probably brings to it. Jeffrey Conway, the poet, kind of used Showgirls as like the trilogy of camp. And that was, his trilogy of camp was complete: Valley of the Dolls, Mommy Dearest, and Showgirls. And yes, you still will have those films are celebrated amongst, queer audiences. And, we know those films and we love those films. But I think with Showgirls, Verhoeven just brings another kind of edge to it that, there are people from all walks of life that are, kind of fascinated and interested and curious by Showgirls. So, and I think because of the response and because of, the last 20, 25 years of people celebrating it at the midnight hour, it kind of, I think, opened the door more for critics and people to kind of reevaluate it and kind of take a second look. Because this kind of reevaluation of it has been going on for quite some time. Yeah.
Give me a second. I'll come back.
ahead.
Did you think about interviewing anybody from the cast and crew, or was it, this is somebody else's movie now? This is these people that you talk to?
I mean, yeah, that obviously that idea, that thought always, would pop into my head, but it was something I, would always just kind of slap down and just like, that's not this movie. That's a different movie. And, while those interviews would be interesting, I think, but, I don't know if they would give us any more insight into our own kind of fascination and curiosity with it. And I think that what I enjoyed most about, all these perspectives is, all the dots kind of started to connect, and, people, these, the contributors are, brilliant. I mean, they're amazing writers, and, they've spent so much time thinking about this. And, I just wanted to kind of just take everything and then find ways to kind of make it work as a documentary, because that's what I found interesting, was just, the ways in which, our relationship to the film has evolved and how it continues to evolve.
Well, and the elements you feature of the cast members and sort of their take or their spin on how they felt, what they felt they were going for, I think also continues that dialogue. And that's part of why Luke and I were sitting there at the beginning going, okay, wait, did they know? Did they not know? What was it? And it does, and seeing the end of the film, you do kind of start to wonder, like, well, what's Elizabeth Berkley going to do now? Like, what do you think she's going to do now?
I don't know. I don't know what she's going to do now. I mean, I know that they did a reboot of Saved by the Bell. I know she was working on that, and I think it'll be something that people. I mean, it's such an iconic and classic like performance and role that like it's something that it's why people flock to those screenings, is that performance, and I think that performance was unfairly singled out. That she was clearly following direction, it was the way she was directed. And I was glad to see, 5 years ago, Paul Verhoeven, kind of took a little bit more ownership of that. And so, I think that, it's hard to say, because obviously she's had a much different experience to this whole, that is completely, I would imagine, painful. And, it just, so it's hard to know what people take from it. But one thing I know that what was so nice about that screening was the fans and the people that love the film and love that character and love her just wanted to see like that acceptance and that embrace. And everyone wanted us to feel like there was like we're at peace, we're happy, we're embracing this, and let's just enjoy all this together. And I think that gave so many people so much joy, that have loved this film for the last 25 years.
Yeah.
Do you think she's seen your film? Do you know if she has?
I don't know. We haven't heard yet.
Because it seems like that would be, especially for her.
Further.
Just sort of further encouragement's probably the wrong word, but sort of a gratitude for like, no, people are getting it. People are figuring it out. Yeah. Do you know if any of the cast and crew have seen it?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's available now, so I would imagine it would probably be hard to not watch it. But I mean, we haven't heard anything.
I mean, it wouldn't kill Joe Esterhaus to throw down the $4 and rent it. Let's be honest here.
No, but yeah, I mean, I hope they can appreciate it and enjoy it, and
I can't imagine.
Be part of the conversation. I mean, because it'll come up in interviews, and I just you just want to make sure everyone is okay with where they are with it, and just know that now there's so much love and support and embrace of the film. And
From the directorial side, was your plan never to show the interview subjects? Did you film them, or was it just always going to be just audio and drop everyone in the movie?
Yeah, I kind of, that was the how I approached it, and I kind of gave myself that challenge from the beginning, and knew that I was, like I said, I was inspired by movies like Room 237 and Los Angeles Plays Itself, and I liked that like kind of just stream of consciousness feel of those things, and I thought it would be interesting to apply that to something, a little bit more controversial, something more, that we haven't fully decided on what it means yet, and I so yeah, and that was one way I was able to kind of get so much done on my own, was that I just sent audio kits out to each contributor. So I had the same box, with recording gear, and I would FedEx it to each, contributor. And then when our interview was done, we would talk on Skype, and then once it was done, I would kind of talk them through how to like box it back up, and FedEx would pick it up the next day. And so I did that over the course of, I think, 6 or 9 months, I can't remember. And then once all those were done, then I transcribed them and started kind of scripting and moving stuff around. So I was able, it was because of that was why I was able to kind of get so much done on my own. It was just like, okay, like this is my format. I'm going to go with it. And I'm just going to try to make this work.
And you said talking with everybody about what the film means to them. I guess one of my final questions is, especially given all the time you put into the film now, what does it mean to you now?
It's that's a tough question, because it's changed my life. It's hard to look at it the same way again. I still enjoy watching it, but yeah, it's interesting because there is this kind of loyal fan base of the film, and people who love it and quote it, and just fully embrace it, and you kind of just want to absorb everything that has the Showgirls has been written. And it's just interesting that now this documentary is kind of part of those other, it'll sit next to all those other books and pieces and musicals, and yeah, so I'm proud of it. And
You Don't Nomi is available to watch in the US, UK, and Canada right now. For those links, go to the movie's website, youdon'tnomifilm.com.
Be sure to follow Why the Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and check out our YouTube channel for some additional great Why content. If you're so inclined, please leave us a review and let us know how we're doing.
Today's show is produced by myself and Heidi Hedquist. Our reluctant executive producers are John Sauvé and Sandy Stone. Our graphic designer is Samantha Mustonen. Our intern is Randy Jeanette. The theme song was performed by the Electrosyntho-Magnetic Polyphonic Orchestra. This one's for Philippe. Thanks for joining us. Flash, we're coming home.
Okay, ladies, I'm Tony Moss. I produce this show. Some of you probably heard that I'm a prick. I am a prick. I got one interest here, and that's the show. I don't care whether you live or die. I want to see you dance, and I want to see you smile. I can't use you if you can't smile. I can't use you if you can't show. I can't use you if you can't sell. Let me take a look at you.